Hello and welcome to the second session of first course, the Faradarmani course. Today we're gonna discuss the reason of not feeling the scans, definition of cosmic force, healing and scan by cosmic force, polarity force, reasons of polarity field, the reasons of polarity field disturbance, type of healing in Faradarmani, principle of Faradarmani, definition of protective layer, and we're gonna experience the practical part of it at the end of the session, which are Faradarmani Halgheh and its protective layer. So we're gonna receive the Faradarmani Halgheh and its protective layer in a way that we will become a Faradarmangar, a person who can apply Faradarmani on others. It is necessary for individuals to read the terms and conditions and certificate. I went through it briefly in previous sessions. I'm actively working on a translation of that terms and conditions, so I can provide it to you. I can leave a link below so you can go and read it for yourself on Dr. Tari's website. It is in Farsi, so probably the translation that you're going to get from a translator not going to be the best, but at least you can see the reference from Dr. Tari's website. I will translate it and put it accessible to you guys. The next one is healing with touch, shock channel injection, local healing, healing without touch by cosmic force scan, healing without touch by polarity scan, sleep pattern correction from Faradarmani angle. So we're going to continue our discussion on the theoretical aspects of Faradarmani. As I mentioned, there are some expulsions associated with the process of Faradarmani. We will discuss some of the reasons of relapse of the illness and how it would look like on an experiential level. I hope that you've been experimenting with Faradarmani and then see some result. There are great reports, as you had a few of them, and I hope that you will experience more and more. We would like to have this experiences for ourselves and not relying on other people's experiences, especially tonight after receiving Faradarmani Halgheh and becoming Faradarmangar. We are able to open Faradarmani for others and um, observe the experience of others as well, hear some reports from them, and see the result of Faradarmani, even though that we might have some doubts or skepticism regarding it. So let's get into the material. The first thing we're going to talk about is the reasons that we might not feel the scan. There are few reasons that we might not feel the scan. Some of them are, some of them would mean that the halqeh is not established and is not working on us. And some of them, even though that we don't feel it, the T consciousness network still does its scan and will initiate the process of healing. Some of these reasons are mind scatteredness, depression. There are many different types of depression in the eyes of interuniversalism. So in Erfan Halgheh, the depression is defined in few subcategories. I'm not going to get into them at this moment. That's for next sessions. Mental blocks and the lack of being shahid. So the mental blocks and is the mental blocks is the reason that my stop halqeh my stop the halqeh to work. I'll get to that in a moment. And not being shahid as the last reason is not being present, not being in that moment, not being an impartial observer. If you remember, we defined the definition of shahid. We defined shahid last session. Shahid is being an impartial observer, being without prejudice, without having any judgments, without analyzing it, only watching it as we are being scanned. So the lack of being shahid might alter our experience in regards to Halqeh. So the first one, all of us almost, we can say that our mind goes everywhere when we want to keep it one place. So it is normal for us to have mind scatterness that will affect our experience with Halqeh and this scan. And but there is no problem in terms of the result, because regardless of whether we have mind scatterness or not, the Halqeh will still work and we will see the result. We might just not feel it for some time until that mind scatterness is resolved. Anything that we discuss in Erfan Halgheh, there is facility in terms of an ittisal, a connection to the consciousness network to help us to achieve that quality state. For example, mind scatterness, we have a halqeh later on in the course that we will receive. So don't worry if you have that, if people with ADHD and things like that, that their mind cannot be still. Uh, don't worry about it. You will have a halqeh later on that will help you to have your mind at command. The next reason was depression. So depression is one of the reasons also that might affect individuals' feeling of the scan, but that does not stop the healing process. However, when it comes to mental block, that will stop the process, because a person would suggest that it is impossible for T consciousness network to exist or to work, or there is no such a thing, or basically denying its existence, or things like that. Another one is mocking Faradarmani, in a sense that, let's say, like you might say someone like, close your eyes and you'll be scanned by T consciousness network, the cosmic internet, and then someone might say, like, kind of laugh, uh, say like okay and close their eyes, but within themselves they're kind of laughing at it, the idea that kind of it can't exist, or things like that. That also can um, cause the lack of feeling of scan, or even stop the effectivity of the scan. When it comes to the mental block, there's two type of mental block. There is a mental block that is as a result of our conditioning from the moment of our birth until now. So if, as we discussed last session, our programming is merely based on logic, so 2 plus 2 equals 4, and this physical material world is, hard and is impossible to change it, or having ideas outside of that framework, that is kind of mental block that you still have the effect of Faradarmani if you're open and if you're Shahid. To simplify these reasons, when it comes to when the Halqeh would stop working and when the Halqeh would still work, but you just don't feel it, is that only requirement for Ittisal, which is Shahid. As long as we are Shahid, as long as we are that impartial observer, doesn't matter if you're skeptical, doesn't matter if you're conditioned in a logical sense, if it doesn't matter if you're depressed, doesn't matter if we have mental scatterness, none of that does not matter in terms of the effectivity of Faradarmani. The only time that those factors might affect the establishment of the Tesal, the function of the Halqeh, is where we are not Shahid. Well, then we can be not Shahid in different ways. One is, let's say, like the person that is mocking. The second is like blocking it by literally saying it's not possible and I don't believe in it. So it's okay if we don't believe it, and because belief is not a factor that we require for establishment of connection. But there's two way of not believing. One is like, I don't believe it, that's impossible, it can't work, that's it. And we will explain why that is later. It's more like a nuanced um, conversation. But if the individual is open to still explore, even though that they don't believe it, even though that they're skeptical, and also they're conditioned on a logical sense, by continuation of utilization of Faradarmani, either on themselves or the others, they will be able to see the result. And one of the reasons from this session forward, we really encourage individuals to work with Faradarmani, apply it on others, because if we are skeptical, if we are not able to be shahid, to have the establishment of connection, when we work with others and we see that we are skeptical, we didn't do any conditioning on them, we weren't kind of trying to suggesting something on them, suggesting something to them, and try to convince them or having any of that effects. We didn't get them to visualize, we didn't get them to imagine, we didn't do anything, and we were skeptical. Even though that all that was right, still the Halqeh worked, and the individuals are giving us reports of positive results. So that itself starts to reprogram our conditioned mind and soften it more toward that there are some other things that is possible. So one of the importance of having experience of Faradarmani on others, especially working with others and in numbers, because statistically, we can't just do it on one person or two and like not get results. We need to at least do it 10 individuals. And from that 10 individuals, we might have 7 of them having some reports, to having something to say, and then from that 7 we might have 5 or 6 of them having results. So don't worry if you have some of these factors. It is completely normal. The only requirement we have for the establishment of connection is being shahid, and as long as you're shahid, open to experiment and research, and you don't close the possibility of the functionality or the existence of T consciousness network outright, then you're fine. It's okay. Last session, we experience cosmic force by moving our hand in the air. After the establishment of that connection, we were able to feel that connection. You can try it anytime after receiving that halqeh. Today we're going to examine the ways that we can use cosmic force and explain a little bit more about it. So cosmic force is one of the subcategories of interuniversal T-consciousness network. It works like a force flowing into the entire universe, entire cosmos. And as we experienced last session, by moving our hands in the air, we can feel this force and realizing that we are immersed by it and we are floating in it. So cosmic force is like a water that it's nourishing the entire living being in the cosmos, from plants, from animals. So one of the mutual factors in the entire existence is this source as a source of energy. So there is this mutual survival aspects in the entirety of the species that is this cosmic force. The work with the cosmic force in different school of thoughts has been seen in Tai Chi, in yoga, in Qigong. They use imagination, visualizations, and practice, repetition, mantras, etc., to guide this force into their body and be able to utilize it for some healing purposes or other purposes. Some try to breathe it into their body, some might try to visualize it, imagine, or things like that. The issue with this type of approaches, after years and years and months and experience, years and years of imagination, visualization, and practice, is that it's not quite obvious whether the individual actually is able to utilize that force, or is it become a conditioning factor? So individual condition themselves to experience something, so the effect of it is not quite obvious, that where it's coming from, or is it actualized? And the other factors might be that the individual might not be able to actually use it on others. In Erfan Halgheh, There is a type of scan when Faradarmani and Faradarmangar are in the same place. When Faradarmangar holds his hand or her hand, in as you can see in the chart, as soon as the individual holds their hand in front of the patient, they feel this force coming to their body, um, and from different places, and the scan initiates. And the patients might feel there are some tasks being done on their body, and report some experiences to the Faradarmani gap. So that's a scan with cosmic force. There are some important factors to discuss here. The body position of the Faradarmani is not important. So the individual can be lying down, standing, sitting, or any comfortable position that they want. Having a closed eyes or open eyes also is not necessary. It's only suggested by Faradarmani for the Faradarmani to not be distracted, so they can have more experience or feeling of it. We will go to the chart of Faradarmani, all the different types that we can do after receiving Faradarmani Halgheh and its protective layer. The individuals are able to put their hands in the specific location where the pain is or where the issue is. Then the patient can report and experience some effects. For example, the shifts in the intensity of the pain, and feeling some level of recovery, sometimes even complete recovery. Here's the chart of different ways that we can do Faradarmani. So we have Faradarmani long distance and we have close distance. We will discuss the long distance. Right now we are talking about close distance. So we have close distance with touch, which I'm talking about, local healing. As I mentioned, you can just put your hand on that specific area and ask the patients to give you a report what they experience in terms of their healing. Of course, all has to be consensual when it comes to the Faradarmani with touch. We have Faradarmani close distance and without touch, or non-local healing, which is healing under inter-universal T consciousness scan. What happens is that the scan happens by T consciousness network itself. As we mentioned, the process of scan happens. Any of the symptoms of the issue might come up on the surface, so individual might report some experiences. Another functionality that Faradarmangar's hand would have after receiving the Halqeh is the ability to do shock, channel, and injection. Each of these have a very particular specification and uniqueness. Let's say the Faradarmangar holds the specific part. Let's say if it's the ankle, if it's the wrist, if it's the ear, if it's the arm, then it holds that part and then it will ask for the report from the patient. What happens is that the patient would start feeling some sort of either a shock or a formation of a channel or some sort of like a sharp bar like feeling. It's kind of like a bar is being pushed into the body. Maybe it's in the arm or um, somewhere in the body. The way that this shock channel or injection happens is chosen by T consciousness network, and the Faraday has no decisions in that regard. It can make decisions whether it needs to be channel or injection or things like that. For example, there are some individuals that might be in coma. You hold their hand, let's say, and after you hold their hand, the shock is initiated and the individual come out of coma. Or let's say someone having moving issues, let's say spinal cord injury, and they have some parts paralyzed by having that hand touch in that area, then they might feel some sort of channel being formed between, let's say, the different parts between the brain and then connected to the other parts, which can follow with the reports of the improvement of that paralyzed part. In the process of Faradarmani, there is no visualizations or imaginations or conditioning. Using these are extremely prohibited because it's not necessary and it's just complicating the method. It's absolutely no reason for using that. So the individuals can just open that Halqeh and then have the patients to report their experience to you. Let's talk about the definition of polarity force and how we can use it for healing purposes. Again, because Faradarmani has all these aspects, for example, polarity scan and cosmic force, there is no necessity for Faradarmani to use these healing methods because we already have Faradarmani and is more comprehensive way of dealing with any aspects of our existence. So as we discussed, polarity field and other issues that we might have in regards to the cosmic force and polarity field is just one of the aspects of our existence, and there are many more. Faraday would scan and heal through them all, so we don't really need to use them. It's just for the purpose of introduction, familiarizing ourselves with different aspects of T consciousness network, and being equipped with these functionalities and facilities. One of the fields around human body and around any cells is the polarity field. When we say polarity, it implies the positive and negative pole. And this field is as a result of the ion and electron exchanges of 100 trillions of the body cell. Considering the human body has many electrical currents within the body, we know that anywhere that there is electricity or electrical current, then there would be a field around it. So polarity field is also as a result of this electric currents within the body. So we would have this positive and negative pole. Every individual has this field. For some individuals might be stronger and for some might be weaker for some reasons. Not many years ago, this field is being investigated in a lot of complementary medicine schools of thoughts, and the concept of energy healing or polarity healing was introduced. So the polarity healing is one of the aspects of Faradarmani. And after using or applying Faradarmani, the entirety of the body will be scanned. And if the issue comes from the polarity field, uh, or if the polarity field needs corrections, the T consciousness network, the intelligence will resolve that automatically. So there is no necessity for individual to use specifically the polarity field scan. During the researches on polarity field, researchers realized that one of the reasons of human illnesses might be the disturbance in the polarity field of the body. Following those researches, they realized that by moving the hand in a close proximity, maybe in a few centimeters of the body, polarity field would be interfered with the individual, with the healer, and by that interference, the current of the electrons and ions would be adjusted. And if the root cause of the illness or the issue that the patient has was relevant to the polarity field, that movement of that hand might correct it, and then the patient might have some positive influence. But if the illness is not related to the polarity field, for example, arthritis or spinal cord injury or genetic disease, then the polarity field doesn't really affect the individual's problem. Polarity field is one of the aspects of humans' existence. And as I mentioned, for some individuals are stronger and for some are weaker. But in Faradarmani, after the establishment of the connection to the T consciousness network, with the alignment of with the correction of the ion and electronic exchange on a cellular body, this field automatically becomes corrected and expanded, and there is no need for us to do it by hand. We can see it in this picture that the individual can just move their hand close to the individual's body and then have their polarity field to be corrected. For example, you can experiment. Again, I emphasize on this. It is only for the purpose of exploration and research. So let's say if you have an individual that is jet lag, and I go through that, why I'm specifically mentioned that, and they're tired, you can just experiment with doing this movement with polarity scan and ask him to give you a report just for the sake of research. We absolutely don't need it, because as soon as you do Faradarmani, the T consciousness network would take care of everything that is needed. Let's talk about the reasons of polarity field disturbance. There are many reasons that polarity field can be disturbed. In general reason is the advancement of technology. There are negative impacts of the advancement of technology and the new environmental conditions that is part of our normal life. It can cause imbalances in our polarity field and have some pollution in that regard. So the first category of the reasons is categorized as polarity pollution. One of the reasons is as a result of the existence of metal in our life, metal structures in our buildings, apartments, in vehicles, in airplanes, in anything that there is a presence of metal, then there would be a field around that metal. Long-term effect of that could have negative impact on the ion and electron exchanges on a cellular level, and it can disturb the functionality of the cells. The other reason of polarity pollution is as a result of the existence of electricity current in human life, the existence of cables, any electrical appliances or equipment that would create a field around it, and we will also be affected by those fields. These interruption can cause disturbance to the functionality of a cell and cause individuals to have illnesses that is related to cellular malfunction. Second categories that we talk about here is wave pollution. The advancement of telecommunication technology, Wi-Fi, radio, TV, cell phones, infinite numbers of different frequency is continuously being emitted in our environment, and there should be some negative effect of these fields in our health. The third category is conductivity pollution, is as a result of the insulators that stops or disturbs the ion and electron exchanges with our body, either from earth or with the air. For example, the existence of synthetic clothing, the rubber shoes, the rubber flooring, or all the insulators that it stops our ion and electron exchange with the nature. We are constantly being under the influence of these fields and magnetic waves in the air, and from Earth, we also under the influence of the electricals and ions exchanges. All factors that I mentioned are reasons that reduces the level of absorption of ion and electrons that are free in the air and also with the earth. So one of the major problems that humans have in regards to being far from nature is the interruption with the level of exchanges of ion and electron with an environment. Before, we would just walk barefoot and have that exchanges. Being in nature was a very good way to naturally boost that ion and electron exchange that would give us a better overall state of well-being. So any reduction of the electron ion exchange with our body can result different illnesses for us. One of the most basic issues that we might experience is being exhausted. We see that when individuals are working space stations or pilots, because they are spending a lot of times in metal structures away from Earth. When the individuals come back from a flight, or let's say come back from the space stations, they feel that they are more tired comparing to the hours that they put in work and comparing to the others that they worked on Earth. As you can see in the picture, this is the way that we are receiving charges, electron charges or ion release or vice versa, either from the Earth to the air or from the air to the Earth. So these exchanges are disturbed as a result of all the reasons that we mentioned. As a general reason of advancement of technology, all the polarity pollutions, wave pollutions, and conductivity pollutions. So the existence of those factors would alter this natural exchange with air and the earth, and that can result different illnesses and disorders in regards to the lack of ion and electron exchange. In Faradarmani, after the scan, if there is any type of issue as a result of the lack of this exchange, T consciousness field would correct the polarity field and balance the ion and electron exchanges within our body, and that will result the recovery of the illnesses or any issues that patients or individuals might experience. Another reason of polarity field disturbance is the celestial objects. The celestial objects, just like Earth, all have a magnetic field that are influencing one another. The existence of sun, moon, especially in specific positions. For example, the existence of moon in Scorpio constellation. There are historical experiences mentioning that high level of physical, psychological, and mental imbalances. What happens is that these magnetic fields and other fields of the celestial objects would alter the polarity field on Earth, and as a result of these exchanges, it can disturb the balances and affect and alter the human's state. So one of the natural ways that the polarity field can be corrected is nature. So nature is one of the best factors of healing. There are many experiences that individuals going to the nature away from technological life and have a peaceful experience. And they might consider that as a result of a very clean, fresh weather and a lot of oxygen and things like that, even though that also could be a factor. But one of the main factor is this correction of the polarity fields, because the fields in the nature causes the correction of the human's existential fields and boost the overall state of health and well-being. As we mentioned, Faradarmani would correct and align all these ions and electron exchanges within our body. So there is no concern for us that we have to now live in the technological life. One of the advantage of utilizing T consciousness network facilities is the ability that gives us to adapt with this modernized life, this technological life, and all its negative consequences. So we can still be in this way of life and be able to maintain our health. Let's talk about different ways that we can use Faradarmani. We already talked about some of the aspects of close distance. There are two general ways that we can use Faradarmani. One is long distance and one is short distance or close distance. For long distance, we have simultaneous and non-simultaneous, and each of these we can do it either one way or two ways. I will explain what that means. When it comes to close distance, we explained we can use it with touch, local healing, or non-local healing, which would be only by the guide of network, the T consciousness network. Shock injection channel would be basically a decision made by the network, and the Faradarmani has no role to determining which one is necessary. There are some reported experiences as well that a Faradarmani would be close to the patient, to the Faradarmani, and while they just standing there and opening the halqeh for them, they might experience that their hand kind of being guided to move in a certain area. And then after the person move his or her hand toward that area, and not necessarily touching, or it could be touching, then the patient would experience a shock injection or channel. And these are just words to explain the experience that the individual has. It's an aim to kind of describe the subtleties of the experience. And the other one is that we just stand there and we open the halqeh and it's healing under the Universal T Consciousness Network. The T Consciousness Network is just basically is open, is functioning, and it's scanning. Everything is hands-off operation. I'm gonna explain you the long distance with some pictures so you can understand it better. Faradarmani long distance, one of the most simplest way to establish the etisal. It can be simultaneous or non-simultaneous. It is in a way that the Faradarmani would nazar to the halqeh for a person and in whatever time, and the halqeh is established for the patient in whatever time that they want to do it. So after this, the Faradarmani doesn't have to do anything. They just do one nazar for that person, and that will establish the etisal, that connection, and the patient can receive the halqeh and see the result whenever they want. In general, one of the specification of the patient is necessary. Either is the name of the patient, or if you have an image of the patient, if you're familiar with their face, for either the Faradarmani himself or someone introducing that individuals to the Faradarmani. So that's all it's needed. I'm gonna give you some scenarios so you understand the subtleties better, because I had individuals that misunderstood this part of having an image, and when they want to request for a Faradarmani, they send me the image of the individual. That's not necessary, and I tell you why. So if a person wants to open Faradarmani long distance for someone else, there is only one of these factors are necessary. Either the Faradarmani knows the individual's, the patient's name. If it doesn't know the name, they saw their picture even once. They don't have to have their picture. Or if they don't have their picture and don't know their name, they maybe saw them once, or they haven't even seen them once, but someone is introducing that patient to Faradarmani. Let's say you come to me and say, Furia, I want you to do Faradarmani for this person, and you don't have the Faradarmani yourself, let's say, and then you know the person, you either saw the person, you either have the name of the person, even you having the name, seen the image once or seen the individual once is sufficient for me to open Halqeh for that person without me as a Faradarmangar having that picture, knowing the name, or seeing that person. So it is important to understand that the T consciousness network is intelligent. It can access those information directly, but there has to be some information somewhere. It could be as subtle as you, as someone that introduced a patient to me indirectly, knowing the person or seeing the person once. And you can say, like, I want you to open Faradarmani for this person. I don't know their name. I've seen them walking past by me in the street. I don't have their picture. I don't know their name. And I don't know them. I just saw them once. And that's enough information because you've seen them once, right? So these are the different scenarios. I want you to understand this completely because it establishes a foundation of how intelligent the T consciousness network is. So after Faradarmangar intend to the Halqeh and establish the connection for the patient, then there is nothing more for the Faradarmangar to do, and the individual can just receive the Halqeh. The more interference from Faradarmangar, the less effect. The less interference of Faradarmangar is better result. It is very important for the Faradarmangar to not have any interference whatsoever in the process. The less interference it is, the better the result becomes. The difference between one-way or two-way Faradarmani is that if the other person, the patient, knows that you're doing etisal for them, or they don't know. If they know, it's considered two-way, which means that the patient or the other individual is also cooperating with the process. They're also engaging with the process. The one way is that, let's say someone is walking somewhere in a street and you open Faradarmani for them without them knowing. If you're close to them, then that would be a close distance one way. If you're far from them, let's say your friend is at the gathering and calls you and tell you that ask you to open Faradarmani for a person that is in that gathering. So you're not there, it would be long distance and it would be one way because the other person is not aware that you're doing it. Opening Faradarmani one way in the sense that the other person doesn't know it, there is no issue with it because Faradarmani is one of the halqas and facilities of T consciousness network that doesn't require consent from other individuals. It's just like praying for someone, except there is some practical and actual effect and results that can be achieved. There are some halqas that is consensual that we will discuss later, that prior to the establishment of the halqeh for the individual, we have to ask permission and have to explain uh, how that works, which I'll get to it when it comes to that halqeh. So that's the difference between one way and two way. The next way of doing Faradarmani is long distance but non-simultaneous. So in this connection, the Faradarmangar is in, let's say, in a different country, opening a halqeh, and Faradarmangir is receiving the halqeh at a different time in a different location. That individual, the Faradarmangir, can receive that halqeh within 24 hours anytime that they want. And there is no specific time that Faradarmangar needs to be aware. So it's as simple as Faradarmangar would just open the halqeh. They have a list of Faradarmangir. They put the names for the individuals that they need Faradarmani, and they just look at that list, and the connection is established. The individuals, Faradarmangir, the patients, can receive that halqeh anytime that they want. They don't need to call the individuals or let them know again, or for Faradarmani to be aware at that specific time. In this connection, the patient requested for the establishment of connection, the Halqeh Wahdat, or the Halqeh of Unity, establish connection between the individuals and the Cosmic T Consciousness Network. After the request, this connection becomes two-way, and the individual can use it in any time of the day as they wish. However, for the best result, we ask Faradarmani to ask specific times from Faradarmani, so the individual don't forget and commit to it. Because let's say you have a meeting, if there's a set time for a meeting, you show up, or you at least you do your best to show up. But if there is like no specific time to show up in a meeting and say like, okay, we're gonna meet, but sometime today, the person might just be distracted with whatever that comes in life and never do it. So we usually ask the individuals to give some specific times for the patient, for the Faradarmani, to choose the specific times that works best for them. Faradarmani has a list and puts that time in the list and the name, and then they have this list of Faradarmani patients that they nazar, or establish the connection or intent to the halqeh for them. And then for that specific time, the Faradarmani sits in the connection, while let's say the Faradarmani is in different time zones, sleeping or not aware, doing their day-to-day tasks of life. So it's not necessary for Faradarmani to be aware or do anything in the times that Faradarmani requests. Faradarmani role in the entire process is look at that list once, and that's it. After that, if Faradarmani would like to do a little more, maybe they can just look at that list a few times a day, but it's not really necessary, because it's like calling the firefighters or calling emergency responders. As soon as you call, the call is established, they will get there, they'll do the job. It doesn't matter how many people call, it doesn't matter how many times you call. As soon as you called, then the help is on the way. So the same with Faradarmani. When the Faradarmani opens the Faradarmani for an individual, that's established, and it is up for the Faradarmani to sit and receive the Halqeh and use it. The next way we can use Faradarmani is long distance simultaneous, which is when there are two people that are in different location with different time zone or with the same time zone. The Faradarmani establishes a connection at that time for the Faradarmani, then that would be a long distance simultaneous, and the individual can either stay with them if individuals, the patients need some support just to be there, that's a separate issue. It's not necessary, but if it's needed, then Faradarmani might provide that space. Let's talk about Faradarmani close distance. I already mentioned it, but I'm just gonna go over it very quickly for the purpose of reviewing and understanding it better. When we say close distance, it means that Faradarmani and Faradarmani are in the same place. As soon as Faradarmani nazar to Halqeh, the scan initiates. Even as soon as Faradarmani would start asking for the patient's report, the scan initiated. So let's say you don't want to explain about all the details of Cosmic T Consciousness Network. Let's say you have a friend, she or he has a headache, and you don't want to get into this explanation and conversation of what T Consciousness Network is. You can just say like, close your eyes for a second and see how you feel. And usually this way of approach is very effective because you don't engage the individual's logic filter to start asking questions. What is this? Is it going to work? And how it's going to work? Is it possible? Is it not? And they just close their eyes and just become an impartial observer. basically what all we want. Then as soon as the person close their eyes and being impartial observer, you can start asking, okay, tell me how you feel. Tell me if you feel something. Please note that T consciousness network is beyond space and time. So communicating with such an intelligent network, it does not need to take time, or it does not need words. That's why we have Nazar, which is something beyond time and beyond a word, is a way of communication with T consciousness network that is so simple that it's kind of complicated for our mind that is programmed in a no pain, no gain framework, or we need to do some sort of physical activity in order to get result. But here we understand that as soon as we have the aim or intention, even prior to the realization that we did, this connection is established. So the scan will be present. There is a principle that I would like to talk about before going through all the principles in Faradarmani, which is the principle of natural selection from cellular consciousness perspective. It is a very interesting topic, and it requires a lot of discussions. I'm just going to mention it to have a familiarity with this concept because it's relevant. But we will discuss it in depth later in its course. Contamination with microorganisms are not a definite reason to becoming ill. There are a lot of individuals being asymptomatic, carrying microorganisms, viruses, but they're not directly affected by it, like HIV, influenza, or even COVID. That indicates that the presence of microorganisms or the virus is not a definite reason for the individuals to deal with that illness. The reason behind it, in the eyes of Erfan Halgheh, is the natural selection from the cellular T consciousness perspective. In a way that if someone have a healthy cellular T consciousness, then not only the immune system works properly, but also the behavior of the microorganisms would shift toward the body. So there is this whole topic of the behavior of microorganisms in petri dish under the influence of Faradarmani, and the behavior of the microorganisms under the influence of Faradarmani in the body of the host. Again, I encourage you to go in Cosmo Intel website and study the journals. There are many researches that is done by science team. There are very fascinating results in different fields. I highly encourage you to go and watch those videos and read those articles and journals. I'll add the Dr. Tari's channel, the specific playlist associated with these researches. There are few of these journals explained within 10 minutes. It's a short video, so you kind of get familiarized with the general idea. And if you were interested in the topic, you can go and read the paper. I highly encourage you to study them because it really give you deep insight on the functionality of T consciousness field. Let's talk about the principles in Faradarmani. There are many important principles in Faradarmani. The more and more you're going to work with other individuals, you will realize the importance of these principles. So it is very important to understand it. The number one is the priority is with conventional science. If it wasn't effective, the Faradarmani who receives Faradarmani can try Faradarmani. This is a liability issue. The priority is always have to be with conventional science because we are not licensed to give medical advice to any individual. So for Faradarmani wanting to use Faradarmani, it would imply that they have not received any result from the conventional science and conventional medicine, and they would like to try Faradarmani. So the definition of Faradarmani is a person that applies Faradarmani, and the definition of Faradarmani who receives Faradarmani is someone that already tried conventional science, have not received results, or does not consider conventional science effective at their own risk, and they would like to try Faradarmani and see the result for themselves. So using Faradarmani would imply that the individual take full responsibility of choosing using Faradarmani over conventional medicine. The third principle is that individuals who are taking medication but have not seen any results and cannot abruptly stop taking their medication may consider using Faradarmani, and under the supervision of their doctor, they may gradually reduce their medication while examining their healing process with Faradarmani. However, it is important to note that Faradarmani assume all medical responsibilities. We never advise anyone to stop their medication or reduce their medication. Any advice in regards to the medication is on the individual's doctor, but using medication while doing Faradarmani, it's not an issue. Individuals still can do it. It makes it a little bit hard for individuals to conclude whether the result that they see is because of the control of the medications or if the Faradarmani worked. As you know, there is no such a thing as healing in conventional science. It all goes around controlling the symptoms. So it is important for individuals to understand that while they're taking medication, if they use Faradarmani and see the result and it actually eradicates the issue, it's from Faradarmani. The other principle is being aware of the type of individual's illness has no effect on Faradarmani. Also, the individual's illness is a confidential matter and Faradarmangar does not have the right to ask about it, unless patient himself or herself would like to share and discuss their issue with us. There's no problem, but we don't have a right to ask about it. Number 5, every time a Faradarmangar establish a tesal, he or she would also be connected and scanned. So as soon as one wants to open Faradarmani for someone else, then they themselves also be under the influence of the scan and Faradarmani. Another principle here is how Faradarmani works in a very small chart. Faradarmani, cosmic T consciousness scan, expulsion, and healing. This is a principle. It is important to understand. It is necessary for the healing to have expulsion, notification of the symptoms, which means that the symptoms comes up on the surface, the individual feel them. It might feel like an actual issue, but it's not the actual issue. It's just the symptoms, the indication and notification of the issue. I'll give you a personal experience with a patient. I was working with a lady that was dealing with celiac, extreme allergy to gluten. In order for her to be able to control that allergy and its symptoms, she was taking medications. So the medication caused diabetes. And in order for her to control the diabetes, she was taking medication, and the other medication was causing her almost kidney failure. So she was traveling with a big Ziploc bag of pills. When we did Faradarmani, she was experiencing sweating, heart palpitation, which is one of the indication of high blood sugar. So she was concerned. She used her device to measure the blood sugar, and the blood sugar was about 6.2, which is normal. So for the individual that are under the influence of the scan, they might have experiences as real as an actual issue, but please note that those are the notification of the symptoms, but not the actual problem. Number 8, multiple Faradarmangar can perform Faradarmani on one patient simultaneously, and a single Faradarmangar can perform Faradarmani on multiple patients. It is essential to note that the individual who perform Faradarmani do not make a difference, as the consciousness network itself performs the task and the individual plays no role in it. So back into the calling the emergency responders analogy, once we have an emergency, doesn't matter if thousands of people call or one person does. As soon as that call is established, then the help is on the way, the scan would be done. So there's absolutely no difference between how many time a person did Faradarmani for another individual or how many Faradarmangar did Faradarmani for the patient. That does not affect the result. Number 9, it is not necessary to believe in the Halqeh of unity or T-consciousness network or the Halqeh or the Etisal. The only requirement is to be Shahid, an impartial observer. We already discussed the nuances of that. I'm not going to get to it more. If you didn't understand this, please go back to the beginning of this video or a previous session to understand it better. Number 10, Faradarmani is not affected by the type of illness, including genetic organ malfunction, infectious disease, mechanical issues. Let's say, for example, if someone's spinal cord is injured, if someone has a broken bone, or things like that. Senility, mental problems, psychological, psychosomatic, mentosomatic, or even the severity and the duration of the illness is not a factor that would alter the effectivity of Faradarmani. So Faradarmani is not limited by any of these factors. Doesn't matter if it's genetic, if it's organ malfunction, if it's infectious disease, if it's mechanical issues, if it's like physical, if it's senility as a result of the individual's old age, if it's a mental problem, if it's psychological, psychosomatic, mentosomatic. We will define all those types of illnesses in depth, or the severity or the duration. Even terminal illnesses were healed. We had many good results, terminal illnesses as well. There are a few more principles I'm going to discuss. The times of the long distance connections for Faradarmani can be set during the 24 hours. The individuals are free to use Faradarmani as many times that they want. So there is no limitation in regards to how many times a Faradarmani can use this halqeh or the connection. This specific times from Faradarmani is set by their own time. So basically, if you're in a different time zone, I'm the Faradarmani and you're the Faradarmani. And if you ask me to do a Faradarmani for you, and if I ask you to give me some times that you're gonna do a Tesal, do the connection, then we don't need to really convert those times, because as soon as you write those times in your list, it would be set in T-consciousness network hypothetical list, and then the connection would be established at that specific time. There is no difference between Faradarmani long distance and short distance in terms of the effectivity and the result. Certain circumstances like talents, abilities, experience, or the individual's goodness has no role in the connection. This principle that I'm going to discuss, it's for the purpose of asking for a report, because when you do Faradarmani, you also want to see the result. You want to ask the report from the individuals that you open Halqeh for and see how they did. So children, individual in coma, elderly individuals that are dealing with Alzheimer's or they are unable to talk to you, the individuals with mental and psychological issues, emergency circumstances, and individuals with mental disabilities. So for these individuals, we don't ask reports from them. Obviously, we can't. It's not possible, but we can maybe talk to their guardians and see if they can monitor and give us a report of how they're doing. Another principle is that it is best to do Faradarmani from far distance without touch, because in that way, the Faradarmangir or Faradarmangar would not be confused or skeptical about the circumstances of the healing process. So let's say if you're in a close distance and the individual would, uh, even if you pass them a glass of water or something, and if they have like a extraordinary healing that they might associate that healing to Faradarmangar, to the individual, and not to the T consciousness network. So the best way to go about healing is doing far distance without touch to be able to have an example for the best conclusion. Another principle is that Faradarmangar would not deal with any type of negative karma or negative consequences because it's all being administrated by the divine agents of God and not Faradarmangar, him or herself. Also, as we mentioned, that individual will receive a protection layer that would protect individuals from the negative cellular T consciousness, the general negative consciousness of the individuals, the patient, the penetration of non-organic viruses. We'll discuss that later. By receiving protective layer after agreeing to the terms and condition, which is based on utilizing Erfan Halgheh practical part only for positive purposes, for the advancement of humans' Kamal path, and not for boosting ego, showing off, or associating it with any other path or practice, adding or reducing anything to it, and providing it as it is, as we explained. Individuals will be able to receive that protective layer and be equipped by this protective layer and not being affected by the faulty cellular consciousness, general negative consciousness, or the interference of the non-organic viruses. We will elaborate in all those terms in depth later in the course. Considering the fact that the Faradarmani is being done by the T Consciousness Network, Faradarmangar has no right to consider any type of illness incurable. So there is no illness that should be considered incurable by Faradarmangar because the Faradarmani is being done by T Consciousness Network himself. Considering that T Consciousness Network is a collection of intelligence governing the entire universe that is not matter or energy, therefore is not bounded by space or time. So close distance or long distance is possible when using Faradarmani. Also, another important principle is that considering that Faradarmani is done by T Consciousness Network, therefore individuals have no right to associate any of the results or any of the operation or process to themselves. Another principle is that considering that the divine T consciousness, it is forbidden to add anything from what we discussed earlier. The individuals that violate these laws would have ethical consequences on a spiritual and consciousness level. And it only indicates that individuals are after showing off and boosting their ego, glorifying the self, and not for the humanitarian purposes. Another principle is regarding the pains and illnesses, as well as the medical history of Faradarmangir. Anything that has not healed yet or was healed incompletely, anything as such, symptoms and signs would come on the surface based on the charts that we see here. So here we have an illness. In many of the cases, the healing is achieved very quickly with no relapse. So in many cases, as we see in the chart, the signs of the pain or illness would just get reduced gradually to the healing state. In some other cases, we see that at first the pain or the illness peaks to the certain stage, and then the healing process initiates by the reduction of that pain and gradually reaches to the healing state. What we mean by the peak stage of the illness and pain is that the cellular memory would present all the information regarding those issues, and the healthy cellular T consciousness would replace it for the purpose of healing. For example, let's say if there's a tumor in the patient's body after Faradarmani, the symptoms of that becomes active, but that doesn't mean that the tumor gets bigger, but the pain of that might come on the surface, and following that, the healing process would result the reduction of the pain, and it gets to a stable condition. Or in individuals with allergy, after receiving Faradarmani, their allergic reactions might come up on the surface. They might have some presentations of those symptoms, and following that, the gradual improvement would be seen in the individual's state. There are other different issues we can make an example of, like migraine. As soon as the scan is done, there would be a peak stage of the migraine, let's say, and then it gets to that highest peak, and then gradually fades to the healing state. We're going to discuss some of the types of relapses of illnesses when we do Faradarmani. So you familiarize yourself with different charts and being aware of what you're expecting when you do Faradarmani for yourself as well as others. There are different charts that we're going to discuss and the reason behind it. So here you see this chart that we have a gradual healing, and then we have a relapse of an illness. And in this relapse, we see that the state of the relapse is improved. Then it reaches to that peak and gradually goes to the healing process, and then comes down and relapse again, less and less and less, and gradually gets to that healing state. There are other examples here that we see. We have the illness line here, and we have a healing process and the healing state. But then we have a relapse. The first relapse is more intense than the initial state of an illness. And this is where individual have fear of they did something that they actually got worse. So it is important to continue and not giving up, because they will, if they continue, they will see the improvement back into that healing state, and they might have a relapse. And if they continue back to healing state and so on and so forth, and gradually to the healing state. And those are the two type of psychosomatic illnesses. The first one, we have this gradual healing, but with few relapses, and each relapse is more improved state in comparison to the prior stage. And this one, we have this one initial relapse that the peak of the relapse is slightly more intense than the initial state, but then also gradually goes back to healing state, and then have a gradual fluctuation to the healing state. We have worldview related illnesses. In worldview related illnesses, we see that the illness is healed by Faradarmani, and then it comes back again, and then it's healed again and comes back again and again and again. And the reason is that the illness is based on an individual's worldview. We will get to the details of all these charts, so don't worry about them. It's just for the sake of demonstration and familiarization of the type of relapses in Faradarmani. If you experience things like this, so you know, we will delve deep into this material. So the illness, it's healed by Faradarmani. Let's say the individual had a heart stroke hearing a death news. So they had the illness, heart stroke, healing with Faradarmani, and then they're fine until they hear another death news, or maybe even hear or read about death news. And then they're back to their state. They might have, depending on the worldview and how that's programmed, they might have a heart stroke again or go back to that state again. And healing of Faradarmani again, and then that might happen again. So this relapse is depending on when that event that caused the illness would happen based on the worldview. We'll get to that in depth later. So there are other types. We have the different charts of mental illness. We will discuss what Halgheh's views for, specifically for mental illness later in the course. So we have this somewhat arbitrary uh, situation in terms of the relapse of an illness. And when we discuss the reason behind the illnesses, you will understand more why it's like this. So you see, this is kind of like arbitrary. The time of the relapse is different each time, and it gradually gets to the healing. So these are basically indicating the time of the healing, how long the healing is remained, and how fast it relapsed, and how fast it recovered again, and how fast it relapsed. We need to, in order for us to understand those better, we need to understand the definition of those illnesses and the causality behind these illnesses. So when we understand those, we understand why we have these relapses and how we can go about them so we would have a more stable result. So here again, another chart of mental illness. We have healing process, time of a relapse, and then there's a peak worse than the initial state, and then this gradual healing and relapse of illness to the stable state. But these stable states are in a better state prior to the initial situation. The chart for the physical and psychical illnesses are like this: the relapse of an illness and the peak of an illness. So I'll come back to this chart to show you the stages that individuals go through in regards to their scan. There are some individuals that have experience with fear in their childhood, in their subconscious level, and there are two type of reports in regards to them. There are first category that in their past they don't have any reports in terms of the fear, but after Faradarmani they have some fears coming up. There are some unknown fears coming up, and they themselves might not have any information of how and why they are present. In many cases, these fears will increase, and after expulsions, they would uh, come back to optimal state, and this process might even present itself like nightmares. And there are other categories that they had some experiences and reports of fears in the past. So these categories are individuals that have some experiences or reports of a fear in the past, and they might report and complain about those experiences. These individuals, after the scan of Faradarmani, first they would have their fear increased, and then it's a better state. So here we see that they're a normal individual. They didn't have any report of the fear, having some manifestation of fear, and then the gradual process of coming back to normal state. And then we have individuals that they were in this state of fear and the reports that altered the quality of their life, basically became an issue. And they also have some increase of their stage of their fear, and then that gradually goes up, but the normal state becomes a better state prior to the scan. Let's talk about another principle. This principle requires a lot of discussions. I'm just gonna mention it briefly. We'll discuss it in depth later. When humans aim to connect with positive T consciousness network or connect to T consciousness network, they would they would be under the influence of awareness from both networks. So as I mentioned, our world is a duality world, is a dipolar universe, which has two poles. Everything we know is a gray definition between two extremes. So we have all the definitions, one pole and the other, and all the gray definitions in between. So when a T consciousness network comes to a dipolar universe, it moves into two separate networks of positive network and negative network. Erfan Halgheh only utilizes the positive T consciousness network. We will discuss about how negative network operates and its negative consequences on humans' life in general. These two networks' existence are essential for one another and the entire existence itself. Individuals that connect to positive consciousness network will be under the influence of both positive and negative consciousness network awarenesses and information. So some individuals might start to experience some abilities like mind reading or being able to predict future and things like that. We encourage individuals to absolutely stay away from those awareness and information and not using or showing enthusiasm to them. We will discuss why. It is a very dangerous aim, so we highly encourage you to stay away from any information that encourage you to read minds, predict future. Doesn't matter if it happens in a dream or if you're awake. If you encountered certain abilities, disregard them. Do not show any enthusiasm to them. Avoid using them. We will explain you more about the implication of what I discussed. If you had experiences like that and couldn't stop it, please contact me that there is a way that we can deal with it. I'm gonna let you have 20 minutes of receiving the Faradarmani Halqeh, and we will be back. I'll be letting you know when that 20 minutes is done. Thank you. Thank you. Now that you have received the Faradarmani Halqeh and its protective layer, you're able to apply it on others and see the result. Please leave your experience in the comment down below, as well as the reports that you have in regards to your experiences of Faradarmani on others. I would love to hear more about your experience as well. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comment section. I will answer them as fast as I can. If you found this information helpful and interesting, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos. I will release a video per week, as we're gonna have one session per week for 60 weeks. So I'm gonna upload a new video for each new session every week. If you're interested in coming to the live classes, please leave a comment and contact me, and I will connect you to the live group. Thank you so much for watching. I wish you all the best and see you next week. Thank you.